Brent Rooker was left off the All-Star roster, and it won't be long until he's traded off of the A's roster.
You are Locked On A's, your daily Oakland A's podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, A's fans, and welcome to Locked On A's, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about your Oakland A's during this very strange final year in Oakland. I am your host for this season. My name is Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully. I've been a baseball podcaster for well over a decade now. This is my sixth full season here at the Locked On Podcast Network, and my first doing Locked On A's, but I'm continuing to do Locked On MLB. So basically, I'm doing 10 episodes a week of the Locked On Podcast Network. If you like what I'm doing here, check us out at Locked On MLB. If you're coming here from Locked On MLB, welcome. And if you're a member of the Fisher family, sell the team. Follow us at Locked On A's on Twitter, or whatever it's called now, or it's same handle for Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. If you are indeed listening to us every single day, please put in that hashtag Everyday A's. It helps us figure out who is listening to us every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel. Make every moment more as the playoffs have ended in basketball and NHL. The sports stop sportsing the way we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. No game today. They play Boston. I am a native New Englander. And people may think there is a conflict of interest, but here at Locked On A's, we support the A's. And we want to see the A's play the spoiler for against any and all playoff teams. That's what this show is about, and that's what this show is going to do. Hey, there's rumors about Brent Rooker, and we all saw that Brent Rooker did not make the All-Star team. I did a whole episode of Locked On MLB. You may want to check it out. I think I'm wearing the same shirt because I recorded it just about 15 minutes ago. And Brent Rooker, on the show, I gave you my All-Star game picks, and I compared them to the real ones. I did them ahead of time, recorded that, and then when I found out the actual roster, I compared my roster with the actual roster, and my roster had two A's representatives. Mason Miller is an absolute no-brainer. And I had Brent Rooker on there. I think Brent Rooker has earned it. Granted, he has already been an all-star, but I don't mind having a two-time all-star label next to him. He's put up some tremendous numbers. He's come up big in big situations. I like the fact he's got big power numbers. He's got an OPS nearly at 900. But alas, he did not make the cut. And I mean, who knows? Maybe there's always injuries, so maybe he'll get to be a reserve. But it looks like he may have his dream of playing in October come to life pretty soon. Bob Nightingale, not my favorite writer in the world, but he does do some very good reporting for USA Today, is reporting that Brent Rooker is currently in the crosshairs of the Philadelphia Phillies, and that makes so much sense. It makes sense on so many levels. The Philadelphia Phillies' time to win is right now. They were basically one rally away from making it two straight World Series appearances last year. I still don't know how they lost that series to Arizona, but they did. But the team they have this year is the team that I picked to win the World Series, and I think they're the team to beat. All due respect to Atlanta, all due respect to some of the other teams out there, Philadelphia just looks like they're the best team, and they're certainly going to win the division. And I think they have an excellent chance to go on and win the pennant. And as I said, I picked them to win the World Series. My pick of the World Series at the beginning of the year, I said we're going to party like it's 1983. And in case you're too young to remember, the 1983 World Series was between Philadelphia and Baltimore. I think we're going to have a rematch of that, except this time, unlike in 83, I think the Phillies are going to win. But the Phillies have a terrific team. Their pitching staff is unbelievably deep. That you could argue they have 4 or maybe even 5 all-star pitchers on their team. And once Bryce Harper gets back from the injured list, their infield would be absolutely airtight. But one of the interesting things about the team is their outfield is a big disappointment. Brandon Marsh has played well. Nicholas Castellanos has done okay, but Rojas, Pache, Whit Merrifield, they have a patchwork of outfielder. David Dahl. They have a bunch of outfielders that just have strung together, hoping for the best. They need to acquire an outfielder to give them a boost. Now, there's a bunch of teams that could certainly use a Brent Rooker. The Yankees can, because the Yankees need anybody to kickstart their offense. The Chicago Cubs can, but they're probably not going to make a big splash at anything as they're on the outside looking in. There's some other teams out there that could, use a hitter here or use a hitter there, but the most obvious team is the Phillies. If they add a veteran to the team who could help solidify their outfield, and we know the way that Dombrowski works his team, he cares for the right here and now. Now, Rooker's probably not going to get a king's ransom because he's a free agent at the end of the year. It's a pure rental, but they'll get something, and they should ask for something, even if it's a low level, like a player at single A. The reason why the Phillies are the team you want to trade with is Dombrowski doesn't care about prospects. He doesn't. He didn't care about prospects when it was with Montreal, with the Marlins, with the Tigers, with the Boston Red Sox. And by the way, he put together terrific teams everywhere he went and won the World Series in both Miami and in Boston, and had the mentality of, I'll trade my prospects now. We're trying to win right now. So you may be able to pry loose a better prospect than you normally would in a deal with Philadelphia, because they're thinking, hey, if the difference between winning a World Series or not is some guy who's going to be good in 3 years, bye-bye. I'm not saying that Dombrowski could be hoodwinked. Quite the opposite. He's a very shrewd dealer. But he also knows, look, a prospect is a prospect until they win in the big league level. And if he says, hey, if we could get a good, solid right-handed hitter like Brent Rooker to fill in one of our holes in the outfield, we all know this is going to happen. We know the A's are unbelievable this July. They're spectacular. But there is that sense of knowing that teams are going to start picking from the tree. Miguel Andujar has a better chance. There's a better chance of the A's returning to Kansas City than Miguel Andujar playing out the year in Oakland. And same with Rooker. You could get something for those two, which costs the A's virtually nothing. If you get 2 decent minor leaguers for Andujar and Rooker, then those are 2 that you've basically plucked out of thin air. But it's going to be sad because Rooker has been one of the most fun players to watch with the A's. And if you think the A's are thin now, just wait till the carcass will be there afterwards. But he will be heading to Philadelphia. I think that's an ideal place for him to land, and I think it's a good trade partner. Meanwhile, the connection between the A's and Philadelphia will always be there. As I answer a few questions or respond to a few comments, we're going to talk a little bit about that connection and why the A's current predicament makes me worried about the team's legacy. Hey, let's talk a little bit of our friends at FanDuel, who are the sponsors of this episode of Locked On A's. Do you know what? I love sports. I love them. I wouldn't be doing a sports podcast if I didn't love sports. But you no longer have the Stanley Cup playoffs or the NBA playoffs or all that. There are fewer games, and sports aren't sports and like the way I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app, dream up bets at any time I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head on over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel is an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. FanDuel, let's have some fun this summer. Hey, where is your hub? Where is your center place for getting all your great sports news? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories in all the sports. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, takes, and news, streaming 24/7 on the YouTubes or the free Amazon Fire TV channel app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. There's no game today, as I mentioned, but a bunch of you have written some stuff, and I'm going to respond to some of this because you know what? Some of it's worthy of response. Hey, I want to go first. The first one is from Mike T, who on Twitter, or I refuse to call it X, it's Twitter, at TREYTKE. He said, Sully Baseball, that's me, would love that Connie Mack pod you referenced today. He's so interesting, but mostly forgotten today. Maybe in your spare time. Love the Locked On MLB and Locked On A's. Thanks, Everyday Sully, Everyday A's. He's referring to the fact that I did a podcast where I was in Philadelphia and I was looking for the places where the Phillies and the A's played, and also why did the A's, who were the more popular, more successful team in Philadelphia, leave, and the Phillies, who were the joke franchise, stay? Well, that's because of two reasons. And I mentioned this, and maybe I'll link this episode up, or maybe I'll repost it on Locked On A's. Who knows? I don't know, and neither do you. The idea is that the A's were run by Connie Mack, who was one of the great figures in the history of baseball. And he led the A's to the World Series in the 1900s, 1910s, 1920s, and 1930s as a manager. And he was the great figure and part owner of the A's. And his sons from his two marriages basically fought in a sort of a makeshift King Lear, a Corleone family power dynamic of which everyone was Fredo. And they propped their poor father up in the dugout until he was in his 90s in a baseball version of Weekend at Bernie's. And he should have retired in 1935, and he retired in 1950. And by the end, he was old. He was senile. He didn't know what he was doing half the time. He didn't know who the players were a lot of the time. And the fortune of the teams collapsed as the sons were fighting over it. And at the exact moment when teams were starting to find, the cities were starting to find out that they couldn't support one, more than one team, you started seeing teams like the Browns leaving St. Louis, the Braves leaving Boston, eventually the great tragedy of the Dodgers leaving Brooklyn and the Giants leaving New York. Well, Philadelphia couldn't support two teams, and one of them had to go. And at the exact moment when all these teams were moving about, the Phillies had an unlikely surge and actually made it to the World Series in 1950, while the A's were a joke and couldn't draw flies. And eventually, Connie Mack had to retire because it was getting insulting. And the family sold to an investor in Kansas City, and the A's moved to KC, leaving the Phillies to the city of Philadelphia to the Phillies. I fervently believe that if he stepped out, if Connie Mack stepped down right around the same time John McGraw stepped down in New York, the A's would be in Philadelphia to this day. But the fact that I just mentioned two names right there, Connie Mack and John McGraw, those two names were the titans of baseball in the 1900s, 1910s, into the 1920s. They faced off in the World Series several times, and they were personality-wise, they were mirror opposites, but they were two of the most important figures in the history of baseball at that time. Connie Mack ruled baseball in Philadelphia. John McGraw ruled baseball in New York. And I bet you anything that unless you're a big baseball historian, you don't really know Connie Mack or you don't really know John McGraw, because the A's legacy in Philadelphia is one of a team that left. The Giants' legacy in New York is that of a team that left. Now, there is a statue of Connie Mack on the outside of the Citizens Bank ballpark in Philadelphia, but there should be a gigantic statue of John McGraw and Christy Mathewson and all the great New York Giants surrounding Citi Field, because they were the New York National League team. If you looked at the Hall of Fame plaques, like just the Hall of Fame plaque of Willie Mays, it says New York, in parentheses, NL, San Francisco's parentheses, NL, New York, NL. The team that was New York, NL was both the Giants and the Mets. And the Mets should honor all those New York Giants teams. Yes, they honor them up in San Francisco, but there's no connection. I've made this point before. There's no McGraw's name is on the left field wall at Oracle Park, but what connection is there, San Francisco to John McGraw? Same thing with Connie Mack in Oakland. Now, if those Yankee teams from that same era, you see left and right. You'll see, Gehrig and Ruth talked about romantically, and people know those names. But because the other teams left, their legacy faded away. And when we're seeing all these A's who are honoring, the 74 team, they just had Raleigh Fingers and Dennis Eckersley and all of them, Ricky Henderson, one of the greatest offensive players in the history of baseball, their legacies are going to fade away in a way that you may think, oh, you're exaggerating. But look at Connie Mack and John McGraw. They should be two of the great figures in Philadelphia sports and New York sports history, and they're not, except to diehard fans and historians. So that's what worries me in many ways about the legacy of these A's teams. Because who will embrace the 72 to 74 mustache gang or the Bash brothers? I'm just saying. We're seeing it with Connie Mack. All right, we come back. I want to talk a little bit about Fresno and Big Joe Boyle. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily sports app with over 5 million active members. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you have to do is pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Get on the daily action with your friends and become part of the PrizePicks community. You can win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. And PrizePicks is available in more than 30 states across the country, including California, Texas, and Georgia. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on PrizePicks for a deposit match up to $100. Pick more. Pick less. Do what it is. In the end, it's really that easy. We here at Locked On A's pride ourselves on covering the A's all year long, whether it's the offseason, the draft, spring training, or this ridiculous move to Sacramento. It's year-round. You know what's also year-round? Collection seasons. Just because tax season is over doesn't mean the IRS will stop coming after you for unfiled taxes. The IRS can garnish your wages, levy your bank accounts, and even seize your property. Don't let the IRS target you. Let the licensed professionals and tax expert at Tax Network USA go to bat for you. A lot of times I've worked for media companies where they pay you sometimes in cash, sometimes in a personal check, but they never take the taxes out. Wind up getting a 1099. If I didn't have the good folks at Tax Network USA on my side, I'd owe so much money and I'd get clobbered on tax day. With over 14 years of experience and an A+ rating at the Better Business Bureau, Tax Network USA has saved their clients over $1 billion in tax debt. Whether you owe taxes, have complicated matters like I had with those media companies that require tax planning, finally hit that parlay, you want to help correctly file it, call 1-800-549-1000 or visit tnusa.com/lockedon. Be sure to mention Locked On A's at checkout, and you'll receive a $250 discount on their services. That is Tax Network USA. Have them go to bat for you. Hey, this is a reminder that Locked On has created the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and it's now available on the Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channel app. Locked On Sports is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channel app. Hey, let's answer a few other questions and some other people wrote along the way. I got, who was it? Who sent me this here? Mark Sujian said, watch Big Joe Boyle's latest start in Vegas on the MLB app. He clearly has elite stuff if he just find the plate. For the most part, he did that last night, although he reminds me of our Austin Adams and that too often he just can't control where the ball is going. I think Koufax had trouble early in his career. Not comparing to Sandy, but don't give up on Big Joe Boyle. I will never give up on Big Joe Boyle. Joe Boyle had that performance where he allowed 1 hit and 1 run against Pittsburgh back when things were looking good for the team. He last appeared for the A's. He got whumped by the Marlins. It was the day after. It was the day after I was there. I was there for the May 4th day where they finally got back to 500. Hand the ball to Joe Boyle, and the A's are above 500, and he got an old-fashioned whooping. Remember, he pitched well in his handful of games in 2023. He's only 24 years old. And believe me, the A's are going to make a few deals. They may even deal Mason Miller for all we know. He's not, the fact that Boyle's numbers in AAA, he currently has an ERA of 11.15. Yeah, that could be considered disturbing by some people, but I'm not going to give it up. Why not? Let's have a little bit of let's have some Joe Boyle love. The A's can't really afford to turn too many people away at this point. One other, I had talked about how I want the A's to not share a minor league stadium. It's the indignity of what they're doing is that they'll be playing in a AAA park, but the fact that they have to share it is insane. And I said, why not move the Sacramento franchise to Fresno and then the Fresno team to Lancaster, at least while the A's are there? Mark Sujian says, I agree with you, Sully. The Giants AAA team belongs at Fresno. A nice stadium there, too good for just a single A team. Giants have a long history in Fresno back to the 80s. I used to go to Fresno's Lewis Park to watch their single A team. I remember watching Tom O'Malley and Johnny Rabb and thinking they were destined for greatness. Maybe not, but at least they made the majors. Yeah, by the way, it's really funny. Like, I've gone to a bunch of minor league games in my life. And there was a time I went to a game with my dad at San Jose Muni back in 1980, must have been 1988. And the San Jose Giants were playing the San Bernardino Spirit. And the San Bernardino Spirit's outfielder was named Ken Griffey Jr. And I knew Ken Griffey Jr. was a high draft pick and everything like that. He was the number 1 pick overall by Seattle. But when you saw Ken Griffey Jr. play in single A, it was so obvious. Oh my God, this guy is he's a man playing with boys. And so it was pretty terrific to watch him play. And so there have been a couple of times I've gone to minor league games, like I'm witnessing greatness. And the only other time I saw someone who was that great, my dad and I went to a New Britain Red Sox game in New Britain, Connecticut. And there was an outfielder for the New Britain Red Sox, and he had a cannon for an arm. He had he hit 2 huge home runs, and it was so clear. Look at this guy he's going to be amazing. This guy is going to be the next big star. And he did make it all the way to the major leagues. And that player's name was Jose Malave, who chances are you've never heard of, because he played 41 games for the Red Sox in 96 and 4 games for the Red Sox in 97, and that was it. He didn't quite make it. In other words, you don't want me as your chief scout. But, well, thanks for writing in, everybody. Make sure to go to Locked On A's on Twitter, or whatever it's called now, or on Instagram, or the best way to get me to respond is just go right down here in the comment section, and we can have fun with that. Well, big Red Sox A's series starts tomorrow, and then we're winding in towards the All-Star game where I hope Mason Miller gets to pitch. And after that, a lot of the A's are going to have big for sale signs around their neck. So follow us at all the places I said before. Talking about maybe Brent Rooker is heading to Philadelphia. And just imagine if the A's never left. This has been Locked On A's for the 9th day of July 2024. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully.